New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Hello, and welcome back to Global Focus Today. I am Reverend Dr. Sharri Johnson, your host, and I have a wonderful guest today. That's the only kind I ever have, but this one is particularly good because I have always learned something from each of my guests, and this one taught me something before the show started, and I'm going to share it with you. She said, don't read a bio. Just learn 3 things that you think are interesting about the person and say them, and then let them do the bio. So that's what I'm going to do. Our guest today is Reverend Karen Linsley. Her ministry is called Fearlessly Feral Living. Now, if that doesn't pique your curiosity, I don't know what will. She has a podcast. She has written 3 books, and she lives in a half hour from everything, Nevada, with 2 dogs, 2 cats, and a bunch of horses. Is that 3? And in her spare time, she's an interim minister, which is a much harder job than being a pulpit minister, for Centers for Spiritual Living. Please help me welcome Reverend Karen Linsley. Hello. Thank you so much for saying yes.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. And I love the 3 things that you chose. It's perfect. Yeah. I don't need to add anything to it. That's pretty much it. Yeah. Interim ministry, books. The 3rd one's not published yet. It will be in the fall. The podcast is a pretty big deal in my world anyway. And I have worldwide listeners in this podcast, by the way.
And the podcast is also called Fearlessly Feral Living. So explain to us what that is, where it came from, and how you came up with the name.
Okay. So yes, the podcast is called Fearlessly Feral Living. And how I came up with the name is a bit of a journey. When I became a minister, I only knew what I didn't want to do in ministry. I didn't know what I did want to do. And what I didn't want to do was have a full-time permanent pulpit. And there were so many other opportunities. And I had already been teaching and doing workshops and stuff like that. And I wanted to continue that work. I knew I wanted to continue that work. There had been a book brewing for the entirety of ministerial school, which took me 4 years. And so I had that on my list of things to do. And after a couple of years of stumbling around and trying to figure out, okay, what really do I want to do in my ministry? I realized that a focus ministry was where it was at for me. And so I wanted to use the name Live Wild and Free because for me, that's what life is all about. It's about living wild and free. It's about having the freedom to speak and do and live freely, not in limitation. You know, Ernest Holmes talks about limited lives versus abundant or prosperous lives. And I really wanted to bring that aspect into my ministry. And then wild is about not being bound by the confines of societal traditions and, it's as simple as not wearing what the fashion is because you don't like the style. it's about being able to wear what we want to wear, no matter what the fashion is. That's a real simplistic description, but wild for me means no limits, in how we live our lives. So I wanted to call it Wild and Free. The name was already taken by a school of all things. I'm like, why are they using the word wilds and free? They've got my name. I can't use my name. So I got my thesaurus out and started thinking about it and visiting a little bit and meditating on it. And after all of that prep work, the words fearless and feral came up. Feral mean another word for wild, and fearless another word for free. And the word fearless means a lot to me because I'm in recovery from alcoholism, and I lived a completely fear-based life, total fear, for the first 32 years of my life on this earth. And when I got sober, I realized how much fear, what a fear consciousness I had, and how fear had taken over every aspect of my life. And so I had to move from this place of fear to this place of love and faith. And it took some time. I gradually did that. Do I think it's possible to live fearlessly? No, we're always going to have some fear, but living fearlessly means we can live without being limited by that fear. And so that's where Fearlessly Feral came from. And honestly, you said my name's a bit out there. Yeah, it's a bit out there. I don't mind being out there. That's part of what being feral is. I do not mind being out there. I'm feral. I live differently than most people do. And I have absolutely no problem with that. So that's where the name came from, Fearlessly Feral. And my third book is going to be called How to Live Fearlessly Feral. And that's what the podcast is about as well. And it's about how to live fearlessly feral. And to dial that in a little bit, the podcast, every podcast, I have a topic, and then I have a spiritual principle, and I have a spiritual practice, at least one principle and one practice, sometimes more than one each. And so I take my topic and I weave into it what practice and what principle can help us with whatever the topic is, and turn it around so that we can live fearlessly feral.
Well, I love that name. And I'll tell you what, I hear you talking about what feral means, and fearlessly feral to me is when you say feral, I see a cat out in the wild. Mm-hmm. And no limits, no constraints, nobody telling it what to do, mm-hmm. nobody pulling at it. And at the same time, completely unafraid.
Yes.
Completely unafraid. And I love the wear what you want to wear when you want to wear it, because I never have been. I've always either been 2 years ahead of the fashion or 2 years behind it, and perfectly comfortable there. So, yes. So that works for me too. Yeah. So I really love that name, and I really love that you've got a how-to book to go with it. But that's your third book. Tell us about the other two.
Oh, okay. So the first one is called A New Thought Journey Through the 12 Steps. And this book started percolating in my head when I was in practitioner training. I already had a firm foundation in the 12 steps under my belt. When I was about 10 years sober, I came back home to my nearest Church of Religious Sciences, we were called back then, and started taking classes. And at the time, I realized there was a dichotomy between some of the teachings of the 12 steps and our teachings, the main one being the concept of powerlessness. I mean, the first step in the 12 steps is we admitted we were powerless over whatever our substance is. And then something started to happen that disturbed me. I was encountering people who absolutely refused to get into recovery people who needed recovery, people who were experiencing problems in their lives as a result of their addiction. They refused to get into recovery because of that word powerless. New Thought folks, because in New Thought, we're not powerless. We say our thoughts are powerful and they create our lives and they create our reality. And where I came to terms with that was that there's a yes and to that thing. Yes, our thoughts are powerful, but there's also that whole human race consciousness, the consciousness of the whole that stems from the spiritual principle of oneness. And if, if I've got a problem with alcohol, I'll just use alcohol since that's my deal. And I'm experiencing health issues and unemployment and relationship issues as a result of it, then obviously there's something going on in my relationship between me and that substance. And if I am totally and completely obsessed with that substance and will do anything and sacrifice anything to get more of it, then yeah, that substance has more power than me. And so this book started percolating and I started doing research. And sorry about the cat in the background. She's singing the song of her people, which she does occasionally. But if I have a problem with this, to apply a new concept, a new thought concept to it, it means I need to change my thinking about the nature of my relationship with that substance. And so I took that first step, admitted we were powerless, and I moved it into that's nothing more than a change in our thinking. That's it. That's the first step. So I started putting together a new thought translation, if you will, of the 12 steps. And that's what the book is all about. And it percolated along and I worked on it, went to ministerial school, and the book kind of went in the background. But as soon as I graduated from ministerial school, I did the fine tuning edges on that book and out it popped. I was meeting with a group of ministers at the time for lunch once a month, and they said, it's like a baby, Karen. That thing just popped right out. It did. It popped right out. Yeah. So that book has been out for 9 years now, and sales are still, they're steady. They're steady. Every month Amazon sends me a little bit of royalties from it, and that sales are steady from it. And and you can get the book on Amazon, but you can also order it directly from me if you wish.
Okay, now tell me about The Girl Who Cried Woogie, because I just love that title.
Okay, so that second book, I kind of wrote that one under protest. It's an autobiography. Every person that I have ever told any part of my story to has said, you need to write that down. You need to put that in a book. And I have this belief that I've incorporated into my life where if more than 3 people tell me I ought to do something, then it's something I need to take a look at, that it might have some validity in my life. And way more than 3 people were telling me I needed to put my story into a book format. So I wrote it. I didn't market the book at all. I'm like, okay, you guys wanted me to write my autobiography and get it published. I did it. There it is. Go for it. The title. So after I got sober, I got so excited about life that this word woogie came up for me all the time. And woogie was a joyous word, a joyful word, a word that when I said it, it made people smile. It made me smile when I said it. And there wasn't a lot of smiling going on before I got sober. And so once I got sober, there was not only smiling, but full on belly laughs. And to this day, people who knew me back then in early recovery, they call me Woogie. That's my nickname. And I get to, and I still say Woogie to people. And they're like, that's just a fun word. It's a fun word. And so my autobiography is the story of how I went from not saying woogie on any level at any time to saying woogie pretty much all the time. And it's just a fun word. And I like to use it as often as I can.
I like that.
Thank
Woogie.
you.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
And I like that you just made up a word because you needed one.
I just made it up. Yep.
That's how language grows. Is we realize that there's a concept that doesn't have a word attached to it, and we give it one. So that's
Yeah.
great. I like that.
Yeah. My
So-
spell check on my phone now, it knows the word woogie.
Oh, how fun. Now,
Yeah.
those are your 3 books, but I really need to know, what does fearlessly feral living look like and feel like and taste like and smell like? How is it a way of life for you? How does that work?
Oh, okay. So we didn't talk about the 3rd book, by the way, so I can do that later. How fearlessly feral looks like for me, how it looks like and smells like and what it feels like. I get up every single day and I sit down and I do an assessment of what's going on inside of me. And if there's something going on in there, like some fear or some angst or some anxiety or some ick, I call it ick, just generalized ick.
That
There's
works.
any ick going on inside of me, I'm going to do whatever spiritual practices it takes for me to get rid of that ick and replace it with some love or some joy or some peace, something like that. And I do that pretty much every day. These last several years for me, there's been a lot of outer ick that tries to come in, and it causes me a lot of angst, and I get activated, and so I can't be of any value to myself or my fellow human beings if I'm experiencing that ick 24/7. So I'm aware of the ick. I don't act on it like I want to, because sometimes I get really angry behind it. I don't go into spiritual bypass behind it. I acknowledge it and I process it. And then when I come out the other end, I'm at peace, or I'm in joy, or I'm feeling love and compassion for my fellow human beings. And then I can go out into the world and do my work. And I do that every single day. And then as I progress through the day, if I'm feeling any anxiety or anything, I use the tools that are at my disposal to replace that anxiety with relaxation, for example. And for me, it's simply not acceptable to live a life filled with fear and angst and ick. It's just not acceptable. And so I do whatever is necessary to turn that around and change it. And then the other piece is I share those tools, those tips and techniques with other people so that they can do the same. Because I just don't like seeing people live in their ick. I don't like seeing them experiencing limitation in their life or anger and again, I don't want to go into spiritual bypass. Anger is a normal emotion and we need to process it, but I have ways to show people they can process this stuff so that they can successfully come out the other end. And that's what the 3rd book is about, by the way.
I thought this was leading us in there. So
Yeah,
So-
it's leading us in.
my next question is, how do you go about teaching other people this stuff? And that's where the book comes in.
The book and the podcast, yep. And all the workshops I do, everything I do is I take, so we have some wonderful spiritual principles and practices in our movement. They are incredible and powerful and profound. And if we apply these practices and live by these principles, I can pretty much guarantee that we're going to live fearlessly feral. It doesn't mean we're not going to experience anger and fear and angst and ick, but it means we're going to know how to deal with it successfully so that we can just be happy and live happily. And so the 3rd book has 3 parts to it. The first part is a list of all the spiritual practices. And I've got 14 of them in here. I tried to keep it to 12. I couldn't keep it to 12. There's 14 of them in here. And I list, and in the descriptions of each practice, I talk about how to do them. Pretty simple. Here's the practices. Here's how you do them. The second part is the principles. And the principles, you asked earlier, what does living fearlessly look like, smell like, feel like? How do you live it? Well, those principles are the same thing. We don't just look at them and say, oh, yeah, that's a nice principle. Oneness, that's a cool principle. Sure, I believe in oneness. But what does that really mean? What does it look like, smell like, feel like to live in and totally and completely believe in and apply that principle to your life? And there's huge ramifications behind that. Huge. And so lately I've been thinking in terms of potential and responsibility. And when I think about that, it takes me back to oneness every single time, because the potential behind oneness is that if we are one with God and God is one with us, if we are, as what Ernest Holmes says, unique and individualized manifestations of spirit, then that means our potential is as great as any kind of potential we ever wanted to assign to whatever it is we think God is. So we have that potential. But with that potential comes great responsibility. Because if God is everywhere present and it's in and as and through us, then it's also in and as and through you. And we are connected on very deep and profound levels. And this means that what I think affects you and what you think affects me. And if any one person or segment of the population is disenfranchised, then we are all hurting units. So there's huge, and I have a responsibility to speak out about that stuff. So there's huge ramifications just behind that one principle of oneness. So that's the second part of the book. I go into how those principles apply in our lives, should we choose to apply them. And then the third part of the book breaks it down into monthly segments. And each month I pick at least one spiritual principle and at least one practice. And I encourage the reader to do a deep dive into that principle and practice for the entire month so that they can get a sense of, okay, what does it really look like, feel like, smell like to live in this principle and this practice? And so that's the book in a nutshell. And again, it's going to be called How to Live Fearlessly Feral. And it'll be out sometime in the fall.
Excellent. All righty. Well, I have 5 questions that I ask all my guests. The first one is the one the guests think is the most important, I think, and that is there anything that you want our readers, our viewers, I should say, to know about you or about Fearlessly Feral Living or about anything that I haven't asked you about yet?
Oh, I'm going to be 70 years old in November. That's been on my mind a lot. I'm going to be 70 years old in November. I'm thinking about having a party, honestly. Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
I would do that.
Yeah.
I would come to a party for you being 70. 70 is not a miniature milestone.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been on my mind quite a bit. And I'm like, why? My father lived to be 91. I believe that he chose when to go. And that's part of New Thought stuff there coming in. Mm-hmm. And my intention is to live till I'm 100 and to peacefully pass away in my sleep in the middle of the night on my 100th birthday. So I've got a ways to go yet, but 70 just somehow feels like a big deal. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. All right. Now, oddly enough, that sort of leads into my next question, which is how does what you do and how you do it, Fearlessly Feral Living and teaching and interim ministry and all of those things, how does all of that generate accelerate, encourage, pick your own verb, conscious evolution.
Oh my. It makes people think. It made you think. You looked at my title, Fearlessly Feral, and went, what is that all about? And then when I explain what it's all about, it's like, oh, so it makes people think. And I have the most interesting conversations with people because, for example, the word fear. Some people think that we can't deal with fear successfully. There's no way. Fear is a fact of life. It's just the way it is. We're always going to feel fear. And the favorite argument is, well, we got to have fear in our life. Otherwise, we're going to be putting our hand on a hot stove. And I'm like, dude, that's not fear. That's common sense.
I like it.
That's not what I'm talking about here. And yes, fear is always going to be a component. There's always going to be a shadow. There's always going to be that ick that's going on. But my premise is that we have a way to successfully deal with that. So we don't have to live our lives based in fear. Fear will come and go, but we don't have to live our lives based in it. So I really think that when I explain these things, and even just the name, it makes them think.
Cool. Okay, now the next question sounds like that one, but it's not the same. How does what you do and how you do it, how you be who you are, how does all of that promote, encourage, unveil, pick your own verb, world peace?
Oh, I have a tough time with that one because there's so much to vocalize against these days. Okay. I read something this morning that disturbed me highly. There's a congressman in Texas who posted on his Twitter feed that he thought that they should do an ethnic cleansing of progressive Democrats. And I read that this morning and I'm like, oh, geez. I'm highly disturbed by that. Now, living fearlessly feral, I need to turn that around and practice love and compassion. And, Ernest Holmes says we got to be for something and against nothing. And I am for love. I am for compassion. I am for inclusion. I am for equality. I am for all of those things. But how do we respond when something like that is like a direct in-your-face threat? And I can't be silent about it. It's spiritual bypass in one of the worst forms that there is. I have to bring this to awareness with people because they don't, it was only by accident that I found out because I don't commonly go to Twitter, and I certainly don't go to the Twitter feeds of folks who think and speak like that. And so I've just, and I did check it and research it. And yeah, he really did say that. He really did say that. And so I'm in this place where, okay, there's all this disturbing stuff going on in the world. How do I promote peace with all that? And it's a daily balance. It's a daily fine line. And I cross over the line every single day. And this is part of why I do the work I do. I am not perfect in this by any means. When I'm feeling some angst and some ick and some fear as a result of somebody saying something like that guy said that I found out about this morning, my tendency is to move into retreat. I gotta retreat from this and process it and then come out the other end responding in a way that promotes peace. There's another minister, Reverend Dr. Edward Viljoen, who recently came in and talked about Project 2025 and how he was going to respond to that. And he posted a response that was so filled with peace and joy and compassion on our minister's email listserv. And I thought, I'm going to take what he posted and turn it into a treatment for myself. And I did, because that's how I promote peace. I listen to the wisdom of my peers who get disturbed about this stuff, and then they turn it around and they write these beautiful missives full of compassion and love. And I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
Okay. Next question.
Mm-hmm.
This one's usually the favorite because it's fun. You want to close your eyes because you're going to use your imagination. Now, we are presuming that everything, every detail, every event, every relationship, every single encounter that you have goes exactly the way you want it to go. Exactly. To the letter, to the atom, exactly the way you want it to go. Given that prefix, what does Karen Linsley and Fearlessly Feral Living look like 10 years from today?
Full and complete abundance and prosperity. Full and complete support from my peers. I'm still riding my horse. At approaching 80, I'm still riding my horse. Still got dogs and cats. I still have lovely garden to play in. And I'm still writing books, publishing books. And I have a partner in life. Because I don't have one now. I've got a partner in life that is beautiful and compassionate and is truly my partner.
Well, I could take an order of that.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, here's the last question.
Okay.
Will you come back?
Of course I will.
The next opening I have is May 20th, 2025. Can I pencil you in?
Yes. We did this the last time I was on your show. It was like a year out. And I'm like, okie dokie, we'll see what happens by then. But we seem to make it happen. May 20th. I'm opening my calendar. May 20th. Okay.
All right. And our next week's guest is another Karen, but this is Reverend Karen Cleveland. And her ministry is called One Love Animal Connection. So it's going to be different and exciting, and you're going to love it. So don't miss it. We'll see you then. Have a great week in the meantime. I love you. Bye.
Amazing, amazing, you will do amazing things. Amazing, amazing, you will do amazing things.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time.